Maps are a fundamental part of most online games. Games like Dead by Daylight, Halo, Among Us, and TF2 pride themselves on their variety of maps. Some memorable, but some not so much. Typically, those launch maps tend to be the most memorable, especially given that they're the maps that are probably played the most by default, having been around since launch and all. And Team Fortress 2 is no stranger to having some memorable maps, and when it comes to launch maps, I have covered 2 in the past, but there's no shame in treading old ground, I suppose, especially when I probably did a poor job. Besides, there's 4 maps that I haven't covered yet too, so there's plenty of new ground to cover as well. So, my name's Cody, and I'm here to ask one simple question, and hopefully get one simple answer. Where is it you'd like to go next? Have you ever wanted to see the endless bounds of the universe? To meet the locals, good, bad, or ugly? Are you undecided where your next trip should take you? Well, look no further than your local public broadcast for the show that can answer these questions and more, The Travel Guide. I know this may seem unusual given that your regularly scheduled programming was interrupted, and I know I may sound familiar to the friendly face that's addressed you on many occasions before, but I can assure you, we are not the same. I don't think my name is important yet. We've barely gotten acclimated. But who I am is someone who has been to many places. Some you may have even visited yourself. I am a guide, working to inform you and convince you to consider try something new. See the sights. But just this once, though, let this travel agent stick to something you're familiar with. The Dust Bowl of the New Mexico Badlands. During the mid-19th century, Zepheniah Neodemus Mann, an Englishman with a considerable amount of wealth, was convinced by his 2 negligent sons, Redmond and Plutarch, to buy vast swaths of land in the American frontier. During the trip, he'd become fatally ill with nearly every illness known to man at the time, and perhaps even some that were unknown. He'd arrived to his newest purchases, paid for with nearly the entirety of his fortune, to find the land barren, a dust bowl as far as the eye can see, with little to no value. As predictable as it may seem, he would perish, leaving behind a will full of spite, anger, and hatred.
To the foul-smelling, uneducated simpletons of the untamed Americas, I leave only this curse. As weapons have caused my downfall, so will I engineer the downfall of any who should put one to use near my restless grave. Shoot over my bones, and I shall visit upon you a hunting the likes of which you have never seen.
To his aide and tracker, Barnabas Hale, he'd leave complete control of Mann Co., formerly known as Zepheniah Mann & Sons Quarterly Concern.
To my faithful aide and tracker, Barnabas Hale of the Savage Australians, I divest complete control of the Mann & Sons Munition Concern. You procured the poppy flowers required for the medicines that gave me succor from the pains of my many warring ailments. It has been pleasant to not shriek myself to sleep.
To his maidservant Elizabeth, he would leave his estate, which included all deeds and what little fortune he had left remaining.
To my dearest maidservant Elizabeth, I leave the rest and the residue of my estate, including all deeds, accounts, debts public and private, my tobacco plantation, and what remains of my fortune my addle-pated sons have squandered. Find the gravel I was unable to find. Honor me by placing it in a pit.
Among that fortune, a miracle gravel, found on an expedition to Terra Australis, Elizabeth being the only person he knew that could keep it a secret.
Lastly, to most trusted Elizabeth, I leave the entirety of my miracle gravel cache, uncovered with Barnabas during a trip to Terra Australis. My weakling resurfaced last year and has threatened to blackmail me for it. I give the gravel to you and swear you to utmost secrecy in its keeping.
And finally, to his only two children, Redmond and Plutarch Mann, he would leave the vast amounts of dirt and dust that he had been convinced to buy, which ultimately led to his untimely demise at the hands of the universe's worst sicknesses.
To my layabout, brain-defective sons, Plutarch and Redmond, I leave the greatest curse of all: partnership. What land I have purchased in this new world is to be split evenly between you both. You have wasted your lives bickering over nothing, so I leave you dimwits something of consequence over which to feud. God and his angels will have to drag me screaming to heaven. I don't want to die! Damn you all to hell!
This was an ultimate act of revenge on his sons for convincing him to waste time and money on purchasing such desolate land, to give them a reason to bicker for eternity, a statement which may be more literal than one may initially assume. They had fought each other tooth and nail over the most trivial of aspects for decades, and they now had all the more reason to. This would lead us to the beginning of the Gravel War, beginning around 1850, following and spurred by Zepheniah Mann's death. Redmond and Plutarch Mann would bicker and attempt to acquire the other half of the land, through methods legal, illegal, and questionably moral, finally deciding on brute force. Plutarch Mann would hire 9 mercenaries, some thought to be a fiction even, to take Redmond's land by force. Among these ranks were Billy the Kid, Stonewall Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Alfred Nobel, John Henry, Nikola Tesla, Sigmund Freud, Davy Crockett, and Fu Manchu. Unbeknownst to him, Redmond had hired 9 mercenaries similarly, leading to yet another lifelong stalemate, a story that they had become all too familiar with. This stalemate would continue for over 100 years, in collaboration with the Conagers, a family of extremely talented engineers, combat and otherwise, who would construct a machine that could help Plutarch Mann accomplish the impossible: live forever, and ultimately outlive his brother. Contracting Radigan Conager and supplying him with the budget and the resources to do so. This would be the end of our story had it not been for an unnamed stranger with even more unknown intentions. A stranger had made her way into his store and workshop, where she waited for him to confront him on his plans, knowing she couldn't make him budge on building the machine that would make Plutarch a monster. She gave him a proposition: 100 pounds of miracle gravel, now known as Australium, in return for a machine of equal power for Redmond to artificially extend not only their lives, but their war as well. Sometime in the 1960s, the grandson of Radigan Conager, Del Conager, would be contracted to improve on his long-since passed grandfather's designs for Plutarch's life extension machine, claiming the impossible, as his designs and plans had been buried with him supposedly as a failsafe to prevent this sort of situation. But that may just be hearsay. Plutarch supplied him with the spoils of desecration, instructing him not to build anything else in the files and to report it to him should he find anything else of note. Going against his employer's demands, he builds the TF Industries sentry gun, being accredited for the invention despite his grandfather's original plans having been used. All of that said brings us to present day 1968. 18 mercenaries, 9 reliable excavation and demolition, and 9 Builders League United, employed by TF Industries and contracted by Redmond and Blutarch, are engaged in a war for vast swaths of land, useless as far as the eye can see. The war, supplied with weapons enhanced by Saxton Hale and present-day Mann Co., another subsidiary of TF Industries, and overseen by the administrator, Helen. The land in question is gravel pits, dust bowls littered with fortresses, dams, factories, and train yards, all hiding a facade of the true nature of what is going on from the public or any passers-by from the nearby town of Twofold, and likewise. The participants in our war include, but are not limited to, Scout, Soldier, Pyro, Heavy, Demo Man, Engineer, Medic, Sniper, and Spy. They are known colloquially as Team Fortress.
I blew it!
And this is my weapon.
Let's go practice medicine.
Yo, what's up? I'm a crazed gunman, Dad. I'm an assassin.
If you managed to kill them, I assure you they were not like me.
Some go by aliases and some go by names, but they all serve a similar goal: take the other's land by any means necessary. Of course, there are many a locale that dot the land purchased by Zepheniah all those years ago, many with stories rich and some with stories poor. Facades, espionage, and fortune scattered across the Badlands ripe for the claiming, if either team is ever strong enough to actually claim it. The never-ending feud for intelligence on this small battleground just outside of the town of Twofold, seemingly where the code name Twofold comes from. Forts of similar design sit on either side of a small canal, masquerading as innocent construction materials companies, hiding a large base of equipment underneath a briefcase ripe for the taking should the occupants of the enemy base dare to venture inside and attempt to sneak past the sentries and the guards, with at least one breach being known of a red spy into the blue base, resulting in nearly a full team being taken out of the turmoil. A hydroelectricity dam, covering for the underbelly of operations, in a never-ending conflict of territorial control, seemingly the only locale on our list not explicitly hiding its true intentions. With many path connections, gates, and doors locked at various intervals blocking unwanted visitors at nearly every entrance opening and closing randomly with no rhyme or reason. Serving as a base of operations for the Red Team during the dawn of their untimely demise at the hands of a TF Industries product, the Teleporter, a result of experimentation with Australium.
What the hell is that? Tumors!
While the crisis was averted, a new one would quickly take its place, triggering a false intelligence alarm in the process, a matter still unresolved to this day. A missile building and testing site disguised as a grain processing plant. Both teams aim to take full control of the area, with both sides controlling and defending points. Each point must be captured individually before moving on to the next, and teams are frequently seen locked in stalemates, and few have been able to confirm or deny if any victory that's been had has stuck for longer than a few hours, as most of these battles in the various sites go. Jane Doe, known pseudo-professionally as the Soldier, was seen here, being interviewed by a man with a similarly broad code name, the Director, attempting to get insights on the mercenaries under the assumption that it was to show the people of the Badlands that they were good people at heart. In reality, the Administrator had taken the opportunity to gain even more information with which to have insight on these armed psychopaths. What was done with this information is still yet unknown, as are the Director's whereabouts. The gravel pit, a pit of gravel, could arguably be ground zero for the gravel war. Much unlike the granary, the A and B points can be captured by either team in any order before finally capturing C. While it's unclear what nefarious purpose Gravel Pit was for, menacing lasers and technology strewn about makes it clear that there was one at one time. Being potential ground zero is probably the only notably important thing about the location, and is much more likely being secured for the sake of controlling the land rather than any modern purpose. However, it is by default part of the estate of Zepheniah Mann, and thus is as important a location as any other. What appears to be a factory and shipping center with a main railway track running through the center is another fight for control, with 5 main points. The last on either side is located deep within the bowels of the facade on either side. In the core of the base is a large rocket and a command room overlooking the true operations inside. Much like Gravel Pit, what exactly is happening isn't clear, and given that this particular base would be reworked into an intelligence containment facility later, implies that maybe this facility was doing something they really didn't want to be found out, though I suppose that is the truth for many of these locations. While it's been mentioned that Gravel Pit was likely ground zero for the Gravel War, Dust Bowl truly was the earliest recorded battlefield that we have. By far it is the least developed, probably given that not much here is worth noting. While Well and Two Fort also had some activity recorded around the same time, Dust Bowl, by many accounts, was where the Gravel War really started, and the locale was likely quickly left to stew in the dust due to its overwhelmingly bland and barren landscape. Much like Gravel Pit, it's likely battles had there are only had due to maintain control of the area, and not to maintain any sort of secretive operation. While the Badlands of New Mexico are comprised of many more locales, and the Gravel War has moved outward, reportedly even to other continents such as Asia, as well as rumors of robots invading the land. These are the only confirmed reports of the mercenaries employed by Red and Blue we could find. War isn't a simple thing. It doesn't go away or is forgotten easily. It leaves behind fragments of the battles fought, the facilities that were used to make that war a reality, maybe even the corpses and reminders of the casualties of war. And for Redman and Blutarch Mann, men who were so driven by greed and spite, they sought to defy the natural order and sanctity of life and death, brought about their untimely demise only to continue to bicker into the eternal afterlife. As always, when visiting these destinations on your trip, remember to play it safe, and do try to watch what you drink out of. Someone's been pissing in the jars. Of course, when speaking on war, you're never really done, are you? There are numerous landscapes currently ravaged by war, but for our next destination, the war ended long ago. And the words of a wise man continue to resonate with a message that no history book has ever been able to properly convey to the reader when educating on war. In war, there's only one standing remaining fact: war. War never changes.